Good morning and welcome back. I hope you are all feeling suitably refreshed after the coffee break, with thanks to Digital Science for sponsoring. And this also seems a good opportunity to thank Aries for the Wi-Fi. Watching the tweets in the first session, it was clearly being used a lot. My name is Grace Baines of Springer Nature. I'm also chair of the STM Communication Committee, and I'm really delighted to be your chair for this next session, which focuses on collaboration. So the week after Frankfurt this year is Open Access Week. And the theme of that week, that whole week, is collaboration. So we thought we would get an early start. As publishers, our goal is really, as we all know, to meet the needs of the research community, our readers, authors, editors, peer reviewers, librarians, and funders. And to do that, we collaborate with them and with each other. And the presentations you're about to hear today are just 4 examples of how, as an industry and a research community, we are doing that. Why are we focusing on collaboration? Well, really, our goal for today is to provide you with some case studies and some more information, which we hope will inspire you to go and talk to those in the research communities we serve about some of these activities, and also perhaps if you're not already involved in these collaborations, to encourage you to get involved. So with that, I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker, who's going to speak about a very recent collaboration, STM's consultation on article sharing, Fred Dylla of the American Institute of Physics.
Pleasure to see everybody this morning, wide awake. Start of Frankfurt week. Those of you who will be here through the rest of the week will look quite different by Friday night, I'm sure. This is also my first talk in front of this audience, one of my favorite audience, as the retired CEO of American Institute of Physics. I retired in June. Still staying involved on publishing policy, and I'm going to talk to you about a working group that Michael Mabe, our CEO of STM, asked me to work on. I think he was worried about I might be bored in retirement. What I'm going to tell you about was far from boring. We're talking in this panel, as Grace mentioned, all about the need for collaborations, particularly in our industry, because we exist in an ecosystem. Our customers, our authors, our readers, our librarians, and dear governments who like to tell us how to run our business. It all involves collaborations. After our panel, you're going to hear from Michael Jubb, who will focus on some of the issues that are happening in the UK. And this afternoon, we hear from Roger Schoenfeld. We'll talk about some collaborations with our libraries. So most of the day is collaborative. I was asked just a year ago at this meeting to pull together a panel on scholarly collaboration networks, a working group that has stayed busy since the last meeting a year ago. And I'll tell you a little synopsis of what that panel has been doing. So, what are scholarly collaboration networks? First of all, it's a nice name that was coined by Mark Ware. I refer you to a very nice article that Mark wrote. I have it in the reference to this talk. A summary of a workshop that was held jointly by the CCC and the CLA last November. And he coined that word for these platforms that allow researchers to collaborate. Develop relationships with their present collaborators or new collaborators, sharing of information, including, most importantly, some versions of our manuscripts, perhaps data, perhaps other research results. They're not typically used for group interactions that the larger, well-known social networks like Facebook or LinkedIn, and they're not usually considered workplace tools. Like SharePoint or Google Docs. At the beginning of our exercise, this working group identified over 40 such networks, some of whom have existed for 2 decades. So this is not a new phenomena. But in the last couple of years, just when you thought you were getting comfortable dipping your toe into the open access pool, along comes ResearchGate. And 2 other big collaboration networks, academia.edu and Mendeley, which is now owned and shepherded by Elsevier. The numbers I've quoted on this slide are somewhat old, date back from Mark's report. Academia.edu recently claimed they have 25 million users. ResearchGate is over 5 million. Mendeley, similar number. There are a lot of documents on these big 3, close to 500 million documents, most of whom are yours. And ResearchGate reports that something like 15 million of these are accessible. And they will also claim that they are having their authors deposit roughly half of any new published manuscripts. But let me put this in perspective. The largest sharing networks aren't the big 3. It's probably Dropbox. But an old number, 3 years ago, they claimed they were sharing 100 billion files a day. And our old friend Google Scholar is only 160 million documents. Is this something new? Not really. It's just a new embodiment of what academics have done since we celebrated the 3.5 centuries that a journal has been around. A scholar would always share their manuscript with their collaborators or potential collaborators. Online distribution over the last 2 decades have made this a lot easier than making another copy on a piece of parchment and sending it on the Pony Express. You hit a button to an email list. The networks make it even easier. Okay. Now, is this bad for scholarship? Of course not. We spend this entire meeting talking about how to improve the access and dissemination of what we publish. And so this is just a new method of doing that. And it's very popular with scholars and academics because it makes it easier to share their results. All of us, whether we're an author or a reader or we're a publisher or we're a librarian, we're a funding agency, we share the goal to provide wide access. But there's a dynamic here. Somebody has to pay for what we do as publishers. Okay? If our content that we invest, all of the activities that I don't have to list for you, I think Ken Anderson's periodic updates to his famous Scholarly Kitchen article has over 70 different tasks that we as publishers perform to get a manuscript in its present form, in its richly tagged form and archived forever. And the subscription model is still the dominant form of income. And we as publishers have a concern that if the highest value version of that manuscript is made instantly available on the day of publication, then the sustainability of our enterprise is at risk. So that's why we should be concerned and worried about these things. Clearly, the open access business model is one way of dealing with these things, but this isn't an open access problem. It's a dissemination issue. And we as publishers actually are part of the problem because our message to our authors on what they can do with what version of their manuscript has been, in a word, ambiguous. And we need to simplify it for all parties. And we want to encourage the use of these networks in a way that sustains our business. That's the problem that was defined for our working group, which Michael asked me to chair a year ago. And it involved a very hard, very diverse, very dedicated group of 10 publishers, a nice mixture of for-profit and non-profit, small and large. And we met in a way that I find essential for a collaboration on a difficult problem. We met in person. You can't do this without seeing the body language. So we would meet roughly quarterly. We have a meeting tomorrow, taking advantage of this meeting. And the first thing we did, since it was just publishers and was not representative of all 40 of these networks, some of these networks, like ResearchGate and academia.edu, are owned by private venture capital outfits. They don't report to any publisher. We couldn't put everybody in the room, so we started with ourselves to try to get a piece of paper that we could all agree upon. That piece of paper was called The Voluntary Principles for Article Sharing on Collaboration Networks. And since it was just written by a group of publishers, and this is meant to be a collaboration, we posted it on the STM website in February after the hard work of a very dedicated group of communication experts led by Matt Mackay from STM and Grace, our chair, for a 2-month open consultation. We sent specific letters to many library groups, and we asked them, read it and tell us what you think about it. We wrote this for 3 reasons. We wanted to clarify how anyone should deal with these networks, particularly authors, but also the network owners. We wanted to improve the experience for everybody, and we wanted to improve the collaborative nature of what we started out to do. We wanted publishers and network owners to work together to facilitate sharing in a way that benefits everybody. The consultation worked. We actually received over 50 comments. They were substantial, they were good, and we spent quite a bit of time analyzing them, and I'll tell you about them in a minute. The key recommendation was, look, the policies ought to be clear, simple, and uniform, and collectively, our policies were not. I urge you to go to the STM website. We posted all 50 comments, and we spent the summer analyzing those comments and revising the guiding principles. And at the end of August, we posted the second version, and we posted that with contextual information that said, why did we make the changes? Why did we not make some changes? And we encouraged the community to respond to us, and we'll keep track of those. So here are the key points that are in principles. We as publishers, everyone in this group, felt that we ought to commit to facilitate the dissemination of articles by any means, and certainly this is a very interesting means. And we would allow, since this is primarily about sharing of subscription content, we allowed this to be extrapolated in the way that we always allowed academics to share via other means. They could share with their collaborators, and that collaboration group is defined by the group head. We didn't want to define the size of the group because it would vary between a benchtop scientist who had 4 collaborators to my old field, which was accelerators and nuclear physics. And it was not uncommon to have the author list exceed the word count for the rest of the article. We allowed sharing between subscribers and non-subscribers within this group because that's the nature of a collaboration group. We also allowed limited in terms of the wording here, was sharing with commercial researchers because research today is interdisciplinary. And you may have an academic group that has a scientist from IBM Research. It did not include standard commercial subscription arrangements. And we also included members of the public because there are many new forms of science that take advantage of the citizen science to participating. We learned from this collaboration that publishers have a lot to do in the facilitation of this. All of us, whether we're a publisher or a librarian or a reader, want to know who's reading my manuscript. And so we suggested that collectively we ought to extend the counter statistics so that it would include reading of manuscripts in these platforms. And we vowed we'd work together with standards organizations to make that happen. And secondly, we said as publishers, we would revise our sharing and posting policies, make them clear and make them more easily discoverable. So the next steps have actually already happened. About a half dozen publishers, since we put out the first version of the principles, have reviewed, revised, and simplified their posting policies. And we've set up an article tagging working group that'll be working with Crossref and NISO to add the essential metadata tag to article versions. So it'd be very clear to an author that they can put this version on a repository or a sharing network. And that working group includes non-publisher network owners, so we're branching out beyond the original STM group. And the original group is continuing to monitor comments from our revised posting. I urge all of you in this room to go to the STM website. You can see it linked off the homepage. Read the principles, and if you think it's reasonable, endorse them from your organization. We'll be monitoring those endorsements, and we'll be commenting on them, and we will be making talks to audience like this. We're meeting tomorrow, so we'll take advantage of anything we hear as a result of today's presentation. If you want to learn more about this, start at the STM website. There's also a very interesting article that Richard Van Noorden wrote in Nature last fall about this. You know he covers our industry, and then I told you about Mark's summary of the CCC workshop. And I had an interview in Scholarly Kitchen where I discussed why we started this. So I want to finish by thanking all the members of the working group. I thank STM for setting this up in a very timely manner and providing the resources, particularly Matt Mackay. And I've listed there the 10 publishers who have been represented by more than one person from their organization because of demands of working in person together on a very important topic. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred.